The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Development permits in Metro Vancouver have dropped nearly 12% compared to the first half of the year as developers face an unaffordability crisis, says Anne McMullin, the president and CEO of the Urban Development Institute. It's a startling fact in light of the housing crunch the region is experiencing. McMullin goes on to say, the housing crisis cannot be solved unless building costs come down. It's a statement pointed at a variety of levels of government that have the ability to actually change the equation to reduce financial risk and ensure appropriate returns on investment can be realized. Because without those changes, homes won't be built, adds McMullin. The response from Metro Vancouver's mayors to this committee was lukewarm. UDI has publicly urged the BC government to take 3 critical steps that McMullin says will make a difference. Implement grandfather provisions on development charges, defer development charges and payments until occupancy, and adopt a municipal services corporation model, which is an important point. I've invited Anne McMullin, of the president and CEO of the Urban Development Institute, to join me for a conversation that matters about how to encourage builders to build. Hi, Anne.
Hello, Stu.
You know, you look around the city and there's cranes everywhere. There's lots of development going on. But it's almost as though it's a mirage, isn't it?
Well, yeah, those buildings that are being built right now, the ones that are going up, those were planned 2 and 3 years ago. We're talking about moving forward. And you talked about the building permits for this year, and also we're talking about launches into next year. So it's going forward that we're concerned about, where the costs have just gotten so high that it's impossible to build what people can afford.
Well, I know that we're talking about going forward, but I can't help but also take a look at a number of lots that I've seen that clearly have been permitted. They got started, and now they've stopped.
Yes.
This is also a bit of an unsettling trend. They were already into it, and they're finding the economics aren't working, and they stop before they get further into debt.
That's right. And we're seeing that. Unfortunately, we're seeing foreclosures. We're seeing projects that are sitting on the sidelines that never even get to that point. Literally thousands of units in Surrey, Vancouver, that are sitting on the sidelines and can't move forward because of the high costs.
So you talk about going to the Mayor's Council and getting a lukewarm response.
Right.
Is that being polite?
Well, you know, to be fair to the mayors, they have 2 tools that to raise money to pay for infrastructure. It's raising property taxes or raising development cost charges. And politicians are often loath to raise property taxes, so they put it on the cost of new homes, onto the cost for the new home buyer. And it's just gotten to the point that costs are just so high from so many different levels, and there's such a cumulative impact that this extra charge is reached a breaking point. And so their response is, well, we don't have any other tools in the toolbox to use to raise money to pay for infrastructure. So, well, yes, lukewarm, but they don't really have any other option.
When you hear that, do you go, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. However, you do have options.
Yes, and that's what we have said. And you outlined some of our recommendations. Let's put in what we call in-stream protection or grandfathering. So if you've put your application in, then you don't have to pay that DCC. You're going on the previous development cost charges, the previous fees.
So just for clarification, so you put your permit request in, and then are you saying at that point, then that is the level
Correct.
That this property will then be frozen in at? Like it's
Correct.
not, you're going to be seeing escalating costs as you're going through the approval process.
Right, because if you put even an application in now, and then the fees come in January, and then there's another fee increase the following year, and then the following year. And so
and you still haven't...
Exactly, and it can take 3 or 4 years before you get to the point where you're ready to get a building permit. So we're saying either at occupancy or at building permit, then you can pay your fees. But also, if you've put the application in, then that's what the fees should be. They shouldn't be escalating over time. Now, lots of costs go up over time, interest rates, costs of construction. It's very difficult as an industry or for any of us to control the costs of construction, the costs of materials, or of course interest rates. But we can control fees, charges, and government taxes. And right now, fees, charges, and taxes account for 30% of a new home.
30%?
And that's on top of other impacts, such as, there's new green building policies. There's what we call inclusionary zoning. So a new rental building will have to also pay for, say, 20% of it being below market. So the new home buyer, the new renter, is having to pay for all these things, whether it's the fees, charges, taxes, and all this cumulative impact. So yes, so just in fees and charges, it's 30%.
And the government actually does have the ability to do something about this. Yet, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a move towards embracing this as a concept.
Well, no, and we have been working very closely with the mayors and the mayor's council and with the provincial government before the election. So I do believe that there is an appetite to look at this and to examine where there can be changes, and we have had those conversations with the City of Vancouver. We have had it with the Metro Vancouver mayors, with Metro Vancouver, and also with the provincial government. And now that the government is back in place, we now have a cabinet minister. We have our Ravi Kahlon, who was the housing minister before. So we're hoping that, that now there's an understanding, because Burnaby is seeing their building permits are down 60 or 70%. Surrey's way down. So the houses aren't going to get built. We're not having these launches. We talk about when you launch a project and then it goes out for pre-sales. We usually have a good number would be, say, 20,000 homes a year. We're at about 7,000 so far. So, and these are homes that are then going to be built in a year or 2 years from now. So we're already into a shortage, and we're going into even I don't know if you can say a further shortage. So
a bigger shortage.
A bigger shortage, yeah.
Almost sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? But
yeah. So it's, and you say it's an affordability crisis. Is we're actually at that affordability crisis in that more. About 80% of homes that are sold sell for under $850,000, because that's what people can afford. Anything below $850,000 is the vast majority of what people can afford. But we now can't even build for $850,000. It's costing more to build those units than what people can afford. So they won't get built. I mean, there will be homes in certain areas where maybe the land had been owned for a long time, or it's farther out. But we're not going to be building the volume that's needed. We're going to be building, a certain number that people can afford. Maybe it's over 850,000, but that's the crisis that we're in right now. And the government recognizes that. The provincial government and municipal governments are starting to recognize that. I don't think so at the federal level. They're starting to even, we heard that, in the budget they talked about wanting to bring in another vacant land tax. I mean, you can't tax your way to affordability. You can't tax your way to growing the economy. You can't tax your way to make things cheaper. It just doesn't work.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So on Carol Taylor's journal, she tackled this issue as well. Went to the team at Rennie & Co. and said, how many announcements over the last year to 18 months have there been about housing initiatives that are going to make housing more affordable? They came back and said more than 60. More than 60 announcements. And yet we're still talking about the fact that the costs are going in the other direction. We're really good at making an announcement about this, but we're not so good at doing anything about it. How frustrating is that for the development sector?
Well, it's very frustrating, because really it's frustrating for the home buyer. There's always announcements and taxes and charges always on the developer. It needs to be focused on how do we make it so that homes are more affordable, and what is causing homes to cost too much. And then you can start to peel back the layers. If you put the home buyer first and say, how do we make things work? How do we make it so that people can afford? How do we make it so that people can afford things given the salaries that they're earning in this country or in this province? And that's what we have to look at, rather than saying, well, we need, there's so many things that we're doing. We've got a new building code. We're looking at bringing in 100% adaptability, new seismic, all these things. Great, they're good. They might be. But it's adding costs. It's making units bigger, which means they cost more money. So we've got to put housing first. We've got to put people first and stop worrying about well, we need to tax that, and that person's making too much money, so we should tax that, and we should put a tax on this land, we should put a tax here, and increase this, and freeze that, and cap this. It doesn't work. You need to come up with solutions that actually free up the opportunity to build, rather than making it more and more difficult.
So one of the things that strikes me, and in my introduction I had quoted you talking about reducing the risk. I think that the average person who wants to be a home buyer, or they are trying to live the best possible life they can here, goes, what are you talking about, risk? Aren't all those developers just exceedingly rich? Like risk, I don't get it. And so to them, what are the risks?
Well, where do I start? It takes anywhere from 4 to 6 years, really, to build a big building, right? You've got to go through the rezoning application. You've got to get your plans. First of all, you got to buy land. You got to figure where's the land, and then you make your application. Then you get your plans, and then you make your application.
And you're sitting on the land at that point.
So you're sitting on the land at that point. So you've paid for the land. You're now sitting on that land. It's probably going to take you 2 years, really, to get a sense of what your plans might be, with working with architects and figuring out, sort of the lay of the land. And then you make... Can
I ask for a little point of clarification? Yes. I've heard the occasional report that while a developer is going through this process to build their property, the city then comes to them and says, well, no, you have to pay an empty lot, or a vacancy tax.
Yes.
Well, is that true?
Yes, it can be. I mean, the province, yes, the province brought in the vacant land tax, the empty homes tax in the city of Vancouver, the additional school tax. Now, there's some of if it's slated for development, excuse me, then there are some exceptions. But no, if you have a parcel of land that is, quote, say, developable, and so sitting there, yes.
But you can't develop it without the permit, and still you're still getting taxed for it being vacant.
Correct.
It seems ludicrous.
Yes. Now, like I said, there are some exemptions on that, but if you're in the process, but yes, and that's what I mean. We're just keep thinking that we're somehow bringing in all these taxes is somehow going to incentivize you to build. Well, no, I'm just not going to buy the land then, and I'm not going to do it, because I can't take the risk of this land sitting here for 2 or 3 years and then going through this rezoning process. I may not even get the rezoning; it may be turned down. And so then I've been sitting on this land, and then you're subject to taxes, and you're subject to, a whole host of taxes and fees and charges. And then once you're going through the rezoning application process, when you talk about risk, you don't know, say you've put in an application for a 12-story, the municipality might, and you've essentially come up with the plans and the money, the investors, whatever it is, for that 12 stories.
That's your pro forma,
yes.
Yeah.
And then the city says, no, you can't have 12 stories, you can only have 10, or you can only have 6. And then you've got to redo everything and go through the whole, redo your plans. And that, like I said, that can take anywhere from 4 to 6 years. And you've put the money up, millions of dollars that you're paying interest on. At the same time, interest rates could be going up. Now people say, well, that land's going up. It's not necessarily. I mean, land's been going down in value. So as the interest rate, so that's the risk. So when you're putting in, and then you get the approval, then you go out to market it. You've got 12 months under the Real Estate Development Marketing Act to sell 80% of that building through pre-sales in order to get your financing from the bank. And in this market, when things are so slow and things are so expensive, I've only got 12 months to sell this massive building. I'm not doing it. So that's why we're seeing more and more smaller buildings right now, low rise, which is probably a good thing, except we're not getting the volume of homes. But when I talk about risk, there are so many risks along the way. And then you've got to sell it, and then you have to build it. And then you've got the 2 years to build, and you don't know from the day you started and bought that land 6 or 7 years ago to now you're starting to build it. Construction costs could have completely escalated, as they have. They've gone up 50% over 5 years.
50%?
50%. 50%. So when you talk about, those are risks, and these are not $5, $5 million, these are hundreds of millions of dollars that you're putting at risk. And I don't know how they do it, frankly.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. In all that time when you're going, okay, I'm going to purchase that land, here's my plan, here are the things that I want to do, is it going to be 2, 4, 6 years before I get approval? Construction costs are going up. But until I know for sure when I've got an actual date, I can't even begin the process of starting to contract with the builders.
Right.
And the suppliers, because I need rebar, I need concrete, and I need
Right.
engineering, and all of those things. How do I know when to start? At what point do I have to make contributions or put down deposits so that I can secure that I can get the service, hopefully within an envelope of when I get permission to build?
That's exactly right, Stu. Yes. I can see probably why you're not doing it either.
Well, I'm a small business person, and I understand all of these risks. And somebody throws a wrench in the works, you go, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And yet, the political climate is such that we turn around and say to the very people who take these enormous risks, you're greedy.
Yeah.
We can't allow this money to be going into the hands of greedy developers. Well, what does that then do to the climate to make people go, okay, I think I'm going to step up to the plate and meet the housing challenge that we face? And I ask that because I hear more and more about some of the the best and most significant developers in Canada are saying, oh, well, then I'll just develop something in the United States. And they do.
They do. Well, we had a call from the Federal Ministry of Finance a number of months ago wanting a meeting with people, leaders of the Urban Development Institute, to ask why there was more money being invested in the U.S., British Columbia money being invested in the U.S. in housing than there was in British Columbia. And I thought, well, where would you like me to start? And so it was staggering, really, that question was even asked. That when it just gets to be so expensive that it makes it impossible to build the homes that we want to build. But it's also, there's not a lot of sympathy, right, for the developer. And that's what I mean. It's really not about the developer, because the developer will build where they can make it work. They've got to keep 200 or 300 people employed. They've got capital, and that capital can move. So, they want to build homes. We all want to be part of the process. But it's, from a government perspective, you need homes built for people. And how are you going to work with the industry to make that happen? Now, the provincial government, before the election, they did come up with a number of initiatives. Now, but the thing that to get housing built, Bill 46, 44, Bill 16, that all tried to do, speed up the approval process, create certainty around official community plans, and have more rigor around the financing and the development cost charges that they're imposed, I suppose, on the industry. But again, those things take time. So the municipality has a year to come up with the OCP, then that land needs to be pre-zoned, and then they then they tell the industry what that plan is, and then the applications are made. So it's going to take a couple of years before even that new pieces of legislation start to have a positive impact. So governments are doing things, but this isn't, I always say, it's not shoes on the shelf. I can't just, put them there and then take them off. It takes time. I mean, it takes 2 years to build a large building, no matter what government does, right? So, and then the time that it takes to even get to that point can be anywhere from 2 to 4 years as well.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. In your third point, we talk about a building, you want to put in a building. Well, now you also have to build the additional infrastructure that's going to support that building. And I have experienced, I'm going to use Pender Street as an example, because there's been a number of commercial developments that have gone in there over the last 4 or 5 years. They tear up Pender Street for this building. They pave it all over. It looks really good. 4 months later, they tear up Pender Street again. It's like, isn't anybody sitting there going, we've got this, official community plan. We know where we're going. Why isn't the infrastructure being put in place once, and then you work out with the developer so that it makes sense? The way that we're doing it drives the costs ridiculously high.
Exactly. And that's part of what we're saying in this as well. It's the complex, is we need a different way to fund and plan infrastructure in this country. But of course, most I'm concerned about is this province. Because that's exactly what happens. Let's just say a developer goes into a newish area. There's not the infrastructure there. Then that developer has to pay for it all at once, or not. And so we need to be putting infrastructure in place and then allow us to build. It's a bit like schools. You can't build a school until the children are there. But the way that how our region has been growing, by the time the children are there, and then to try to get the funding for the school, again, you're 2 or 3 years too late, and the children are all on portables. And it's very similar with what we're finding with hot power. A lot of our sites don't have power because there's been so much growth in this region over the last 20 years. The actual power itself is there, but not the infrastructure and
to
deliver it.
Right.
Right. And there's rules in place that BC Hydro can't put the infrastructure in place until the building is there. Well, that doesn't make sense. So we are trying to get that changed, but these are all legacy rules. So, we need to take that step back and say, okay, again, how do we get homes built or offices or retail or whatever? How do we get it built? What is the infrastructure? What is the power needs? Schools, hospitals, healthcare, and that's part of the plan. Whereas we don't. We do these things more in silos, and we don't look at an overall community plan as well, how many people, now they're trying to move in that direction, how many people are moving to this area, and what are the needs, and how do we build for it? And how we access infrastructure funding, again, it should be part of an overall plan, not saying, okay, well, we should just raise property taxes or just put it on the cost of new homes. There needs to be an overall plan, and it needs to be funded properly at all three levels of government.
With long-term planning. And so now along comes the provincial government, and it says, well, you have to increase density. If you're close to a SkyTrain station, increase density, which I have no trouble with that in principle. And the density drops off a little bit within a certain radius around those transit hubs. But now suddenly you're asking for a massive increase in load on the existing infrastructure that was there all for single-family residences up till now. Why is it that okay, so you got to build there, you got to do this. Well, does the responsibility fall back on the developer now to put in that infrastructure the way that it is?
Essentially the new home buyer, right? Yes, it's got to come out of the cost of the new home.
Well, how do we make housing affordable that way?
Well, that's just what I'm saying, is if we're just piling on too many costs. Now, the infrastructure cost on its own might be fine, but it's everything else. It's the cumulative impact of things that just keep getting added on. I'm the city of Vancouver, and they're working on it, but there's something like 70 different policies that you need to go through and have checked off before you can get a building approved. And 50 different people have to look at this plan, and it's not putting housing first. It's like, okay, well, this person, they're in charge of, whether it's protecting trees, this person's in charge of the shadowing, this person's in charge of the viewscapes, this person's in charge of the green building, this person's in engineering, rather than saying, how do we collectively work together to get this housing built and do it in a way that people can afford. For instance, a rental building it cost, that's one of the developers saying he's built this building, and in order to make those rental units work, financially viable, he had to charge about $2.50 a square foot. 2 years later, he's now having to charge more than $4 a square foot for basically the same type of a building. But salaries have not gone up 50, 60%. So it just doesn't work, right? Because salaries haven't gone up that much. So you could afford it. He could afford to build it when he could charge $2.50 a square foot. But now he has to charge over $4 a square foot to make that building work financially. It doesn't get built because people can't afford that, right? The vast majority of people can't afford that.
It's time for some drastic changes.
It is time.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you,
not on an optimistic note for me right at the moment. I'm worried.
I'm worried too. I really am, and it concerns me very much. As young people, you've got children. I do, and my daughter's talking about when she's finally come back and finishing university, she'll probably go to Calgary, right? So,
and that's the other cost.
Yeah.
Not just now, but into the future.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.